Hi everyone, this is Mr Neel Raithatha, also known as the Wax Whisperer. Thank you for joining me in my latest video. This is of a patient who primarily attended with a blocked left ear, and you can see this wax, what's visible at least, it's quite wet. They had been using various types of drops. Not only is it attached to the posterior, so the back part of the ear canal, it was also impacted right up against the eardrum. And when I removed this initial piece of wax and skin, I thought the whole occlusion would be removed. But you can see here the patient's got this second layer of wax and keratin. It's really impacted against the eardrum. They had been using hydrogen peroxide drops as well as other drops, but the issue that I have with hydrogen peroxide drops, at least when it comes to performing microsuction, that it turns the wax quite mushy and sticky and glutinous. It just makes it a bit more tricky to remove. Now, we revealed a bit of the eardrum that you can see at 3 o'clock, that blue tinge, and that's their eardrum. And we're continuing to suction it, but it's quite often when you've got wax and skin like this on the eardrum, it releases quite easily when you perform microsuction, but this is really impacted. And what was a bit more difficult in this particular ear was the patient had quite a prominent inferior recess and also an anterior recess. So you can see the ear canal going up at the floor there, and then it reaches the peak and then it dips back down. And that region where the ear canal kind of narrows and widens, we call that the isthmus. And it's typically about 0.5 centimetre away from the eardrum. Most individuals have this narrowing and widening, but to different degrees and severities. And when the ear canal kind of narrows and widens, it typically creates a recess, so like a trench at the bottom of the ear canal near the eardrum, where we are at the moment. This is the inferior recess. And also one at the front of the ear canal near the eardrum. We call that the anterior recess, so in the case of the left ear, on the left-hand side. And if I was using a microscope, for example, it'd be very difficult to visualize inside this pit. So this wax probably would have gone unnoticed, but with an endoscope, we've got the ability to look in the recess quite well. You may have just seen there when I removed some of the wax, the eardrum just flexed slightly, so we're just going to be careful. We got a big plug of soft wax, keratin off the eardrum just there. So the majority of the eardrum is visible now, but you can see in the anterior recess and the inferior recess a little ring of wax. Now, the patient could hear significantly better already, so I wasn't overly concerned with that. There is a bit of soft wax just at the roof of the ear canal, but that's on the ear canal, not the eardrum. I decided to leave that because that's not of any importance really. Now, I'm just trying to get into this inferior recess, and if you look at the suction probe, you can see there's a bend there. You can see that crease, that fold, and that's allowing me to get the sucker inside the inferior recess. And I'm quite pleased with that now. I think there's a little bit still left there on the inferior recess because it's still on the eardrum. I'm just going to hover back and see if I can remove that. And you can see the ear canal trajectory. It goes up and then it comes back down. So that was a good illustration. So you can see the bend in the sucker. And I've managed to get that little piece of soft wax off the eardrum. So there's a bit on the anterior recess, you can just see to the left, but it's not going to be, I'm not concerned by that. For me to try to remove that, it's going to probably add a bit more increased risk, which I wasn't happy to do. In order to remove a bit of wax, that's not really going to benefit the patient. Now, earwax is actually, contrary to belief, it's actually a healthy substance. It's a healthy secretion. Earwax has a slightly acidic pH, roughly between 5.4 and 6.1, and that mirrors the acidity of the ear canal. So the ear canal and earwax is a naturally acidic place, and the acidity is quite important because it helps to prevent bacterial and fungi growth. In addition, the acidity is seen as a natural insect repellent as well, so it prevents the entering of insects within the ear. So that's the one major benefit of earwax. Earwax is also greasy and oily in nature by consistency, and that greasiness and oiliness helps to lubricate and moisturize the skin in the ear canal, prevent it from drying and cracking. And earwax for the majority of the population, so between I would say 90 to 95% even, it naturally comes out the ear on its own accord. And the way that works is the ear canal and the eardrum is lined with a layer of skin. And as that skin dies and sheds, it moves sideways out of the ear like a conveyor belt. And anything sitting on the surface of the skin, i.e. the earwax, naturally is expelled out the ear in that process. And so with earwax being sticky, any dust, pollen, foreign particles that enter the ear generally stick to the wax. And as the wax is naturally transported out of the ear by the conveyor belt motion of the dead skin, it also expels with it any dust or dirt or pollen that's entered the ear. So earwax is actually good for us, but excessive earwax is not good because it obviously blocks the ear. Now, this is the patient's right ear, and they actually felt the left ear was significantly worse, but the right ear is actually a bit more tricky to remove. It's a bit firmer, and you'll see that they have got a very pronounced anterior recess here, and it's really large. Now, the patient has been poking in their ears, so it's on both sides, so hence why the wax is quite deep and impacted. So I was just putting some olive oil here just to soften the wax. They had obviously been using drops, not only hydrogen peroxide drops on the left, but they did revert back to olive oil drops. But on this one, they kind of left dry, this is fine. Quite often we ask patients that there's no prerequisite to using drops prior to attending. Drops, and depending upon which drops, so olive oil drops definitely are, for me, the best type of drops. When it comes to earwax, if you've got a load of dead skin keratin, and I typically recommend sodium bicarbonate drops. But when patients book in and they ask you whether they need to use drops prior to attending, we actually say no. Unless they're it's children, because the children just get to use some olive oil just a couple of days prior to attending, just so it speeds up the process. But with adults, there's no prerequisite. They can come on the same day. And if I need to use drops, I will use it during the procedure. Now, this is really, really large despite all the drops. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use an ear hook trying to extract this, but we are going deep in the ear, and obviously the inner 2/3 of the ear canal, so the bony section of the ear canal, is very sensitive, so we don't want to make contact with the bony part of the ear canal with this hook, so we're going to be very careful, especially at that point there when I released the hook and the plug came away, because you can quite easily lose control, and I've been there, I've done that, hence why I know you can quite easily lose control of that hook, and that can cause the tip of the hook to make contact with the bony part of the ear canal, which can be very uncomfortable for the patient. And in the worst case scenario, you can graze and even cut and bruise the ear canal. But I've just dislodged that wax, that hardened wax and keratin, just enough to go back now with the sucker and remove this. So even though it's still quite tricky, it's mobilized enough now to remove it with the suction. You can see how it's hard to get a suction grip here, but we're just kissing the surface of this plug and bringing it forwards. And then we're just going to manipulate it out of the ear. So the patient's got a nice healthy ear canal there. You can see they have, again, similar to the left ear, got a very narrow isthmus, and the ear canal protrudes back outwards again. It's just some soft wax just on the cartilaginous portion. I'm just going to quickly scoop that out with a Jobson horn. So I hope you enjoyed that video, guys, and you're all keeping well and safe. And do stay tuned. I've got loads more videos to upload in the coming days and weeks. Remember, be nice and be kind. Thanks, bye.